The morning sun spilled gently over the quiet suburban street, painting the tops of maple trees with golden light. In one small house at the corner of Elmwood Lane, Clara Bennett moved slowly through her kitchen, the soft hum of the kettle filling the room. She liked mornings like this, quiet, predictable, safe. But a subtle ache of loneliness lingered in her chest, one she had carried for years. Clara had always been the kind of person who noticed the small things, the way sunlight danced across her flower beds, the faint chirping of birds outside, the delicate fragrance of fresh soil in her garden. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, there was a part of her heart that felt unfinished, as if it quietly hoped for something she couldn't quite name. She glanced out the window at the garden she had tended for months. Roses bloomed in soft pinks and whites, hydrangeas nodded gently in the breeze, and a small patch of vegetables thrived in the rich, dark soil. Gardening had become her refuge, a place where she could pour her heart into something living and true, and for a while it eased the quiet ache in her life. Just as she reached for her watering can, a sound broke the stillness, a faint knock at the gate. Clara froze, heart skipping a beat. It was unusual for anyone to stop by unannounced, especially this early in the morning. Curious, she wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. Standing there was Ethan Harper, her neighbor's son. He was tall, with an easy, friendly smile that always seemed to brighten even the cloudiest days. Clara had seen him around the neighborhood, of course, but their conversations had always been brief, polite, and ordinary. Just small talk over fences or a wave across the street. Yet something about the way he stood there, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his jeans, made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. "Good morning, Miss Bennett," he said softly, his voice warm but hesitant. "I noticed your garden could use a little help. I thought maybe I could lend a hand." Clara blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her careful tending of the flowers or to offer help. She felt a small rush of something she hadn't felt in years. Excitement, maybe, or the faint spark of hope. "Oh, thank you, Ethan," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "That's very kind of you." He stepped closer, careful not to trample any of the young blooms. He said, "I've always liked your garden. It feels peaceful. I thought I could make it even better." Clara felt a blush creep up her cheeks. There was something in his words, the way he said them with genuine care, that touched her in a way she hadn't realized she needed. She smiled softly, gesturing toward the patch of vegetables. "Well, I could certainly use some help with these. They're stubborn little things." As they worked side by side, Ethan's presence brought a quiet energy to the garden. He didn't rush, didn't overwhelm, but simply moved with an easy rhythm, talking softly about the plants and asking questions about her favorites. Clara found herself opening up, sharing little details about her garden and her life, stories she had never told anyone, not even her closest friends. There was something mesmerizing about the way he listened, the way he seemed to genuinely care about her words. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt seen, not just noticed, but truly understood. And beneath that warm feeling, a subtle, unspoken longing stirred in her heart, a curiosity about what might come from this unexpected connection. When they paused to admire their work, Ethan leaned against the fence, glancing around the garden with a thoughtful expression. He said, "You've created something really beautiful here. It's not just the flowers, it's the care you put into everything. I admire that." Clara's heart skipped again. She looked down at her hands, suddenly aware of the gentle soil stains, the small scratches, the evidence of her devotion. She had never expected anyone to notice or to say such kind things. The morning light seemed to soften around them, wrapping the garden in a golden glow. And in that quiet, sunlit moment, Clara realized something. Her world, though simple, was about to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. She didn't know how or why, but the gentle sincerity in Ethan's words had planted a seed of possibility, one that could grow into something much deeper than either of them imagined. Clara stood in the garden that afternoon, the faint hum of bees moving between the flowers mingling with the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Ethan had gone back home, promising to return the next day to continue their work, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. She wiped her hands on her apron and sat down on the edge of the flower bed, staring at the rows of roses, hydrangeas, and vegetables. For some reason, being near the blooms today reminded her of another garden, one from years ago, a place that had quietly shaped her heart. It had been a small park near her childhood home in Vermont. She remembered the cobblestone paths lined with cherry trees, the tiny fountain where she would sit and feed the birds, and the benches where strangers often paused but rarely lingered. That park had been her sanctuary when life felt too noisy, too fast, or too heavy. But it hadn't just been the park that comforted her, it had been him. His name was Daniel, and he had lived across the street when Clara was 17. Their connection had been gentle, subtle, and unspoken at first. They would pass each other in the park on quiet afternoons, exchanging shy smiles, small nods, or a few words about the weather or a stray cat wandering nearby. Over time, those fleeting encounters became something more, soft conversations about favorite books, favorite songs, and dreams they had not yet dared to share with anyone else. Clara remembered one crisp autumn afternoon in particular. She had been sitting on the old wooden bench, leaf-crusted ground beneath her shoes, when Daniel had appeared, carrying 2 steaming cups of cocoa. He had handed her one without a word, his shy smile speaking volumes. They had sat together in silence, watching the orange and gold leaves drift slowly to the ground, both of them savoring the simplicity of the moment. It had felt like magic, an unspoken understanding that they were, in that instant, the only 2 people in the world. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Daniel's family moved to another state, leaving Clara with only the faint memory of his laughter, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and the warmth of his presence. They had written letters at first, filled with carefully chosen words and hopes that one day they might meet again. Yet, over the months, the letters became less frequent, then eventually stopped, leaving Clara with only nostalgia and a bittersweet ache in her chest. She often thought of that connection as she moved through her days, quietly, almost reverently. It had taught her something important, that even brief encounters, moments of genuine care and attention, could leave a lasting impression on the heart. And as she looked around at her own garden now, she realized that her heart still remembered that gentle lesson. When Ethan had offered to help earlier that morning, something inside Clara had stirred, a spark she hadn't felt in years. There was a sense of familiarity in the way he listened, the soft curiosity in his voice, and the quiet patience he showed as they worked side by side. It reminded her of Daniel, of the way someone could touch your heart without even knowing it. Sitting in the garden, Clara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The past wasn't painful. It was a tender echo that reminded her she had once felt deeply, once allowed herself to hope, once believed in the quiet magic of connection. And now, standing among the roses and hydrangeas she had nurtured herself, she realized that maybe life had given her another chance, not to replace the past, but to open her heart again. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Clara lingered in the garden, savoring the warmth of the fading light. She thought about how fleeting and delicate life could be, how small gestures, a smile, a shared moment, a kind word could leave impressions that lasted far longer than one might expect. And she thought of Ethan, waiting just beyond the fence, unaware of the stirrings he had caused in her heart that morning. The memory of Daniel's quiet kindness lingered, but it was no longer tinged with longing or regret. Instead, it felt like a gentle guide, showing Clara that hearts could heal, that hope could return, and that new connections could blossom even after years of silence. And as she rose to her feet, brushing the soil from her apron, she felt a quiet excitement, a subtle anticipation for the days ahead, for the moments that had yet to come, for the possibility that life still had surprises in store. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the faint scent of roses and fresh earth, and somewhere in the distance, Clara imagined a smile, one that might be waiting just beyond the garden gate, ready to bring her back into the quiet magic of shared moments and gentle discovery. The next morning, Clara woke to the soft hum of birdsong drifting through her open window. A gentle light spilled across her kitchen table, catching the dust motes in the air. She moved almost instinctively toward the garden, eager to see the small patch of vegetables she had been tending. Her heart felt unusually light today, stirred by the lingering thoughts of yesterday's visit. As she approached, she froze for a heartbeat. There he was, Ethan Harper, kneeling carefully beside the tomato plants, his hands lightly brushing the soil, eyes focused yet serene. He looked up at her as she stepped closer, and for a brief moment, time seemed to pause. "Good morning, Miss Bennet," he said softly, his familiar warmth carrying an unexpected weight today. "I brought some tools that might help with the pruning." Clara smiled, feeling an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Thank you, Ethan. That's very thoughtful of you." He straightened, brushing his hands on his jeans, and their eyes met. For a moment, words weren't needed. The garden around them, the rustling leaves, the soft scent of roses, the sunlight glinting off the dewdrops on petals felt like a gentle bridge connecting past and present. Clara couldn't help but think of Daniel, of the quiet afternoons in the park years ago, and a soft wave of nostalgia washed over her. Ethan noticed her pause and tilted his head slightly, as if he understood without her saying a word. "You seem happy today," he observed gently. Clara laughed softly, the sound light and airy. "I think it's just the garden. It has a way of making ordinary mornings feel extraordinary." They moved through the rows of plants together, side by side, each absorbed in the small tasks but aware of the subtle presence of the other. Clara felt her thoughts drifting between past and present, the memory of Daniel's quiet attentiveness mingling with the genuine care she felt from Ethan today. It was a strange, tender sensation, the past reminding her that connection was always possible, and the present proving that it could happen again. At one point, Ethan paused, holding a small pair of pruning shears. "You know," he said, his tone thoughtful, "gardens are a lot like people. They need patience, attention, and a little hope to grow." Clara glanced at him, her lips curving into a soft smile. "I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. Maybe that's why I've always loved tending to mine. It's like nurturing a small part of life that you can truly shape and care for." He nodded, his eyes briefly meeting hers, conveying something unspoken, a quiet acknowledgement that he understood more than just her words. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a reassurance that the gentle connection they were forming was real, meaningful, and unhurried. As they continued their work, small moments, an accidental brush of hands while reaching for the same plant, a shared laugh over a stubborn weed, the brief exchange of approving glances wove a subtle, tender rhythm between them. Each gesture, each pause, seemed to echo something Clara had long forgotten, the simple, pure joy of human connection. At midday, they stepped back to admire the garden. The plants looked healthier, brighter, as if the care and attention had been returned 100-fold. Clara's gaze lingered on Ethan, noticing the quiet concentration in his expression, the calm patience in his movements. It reminded her of how small moments of kindness could leave a lasting impression, just as Daniel's gestures had done years ago. "You've done a wonderful job here," she said softly. "I didn't realize how much difference a little help could make." Ethan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I think the garden was ready for it, and maybe we were both ready for a little company. Clara felt her chest lift with an unfamiliar lightness. The garden had always been her refuge, but now it had become something more, a space where the past could gently echo, where new friendships, or perhaps something deeper, could quietly begin. For the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to simply be present, to feel gratitude for the gentle rhythms of the morning, for the quiet laughter, and for the shared silence that spoke volumes. And as Ethan packed up the tools to leave, she realized that life had a way of reconnecting hearts, of bringing people together in the most ordinary, yet extraordinary ways. The sun dipped a little lower in the sky, casting a golden glow across the flowers and vegetables, and as Clara watched Ethan walk back down the path towards his house, she felt a quiet hope blooming within her, a hope that perhaps the echoes of the past could meet the promise of the present, and that new moments of connection might just be waiting around the corner. The garden was bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon as Clara carefully tended to the roses, their petals catching the sunlight like tiny flames. The air was filled with the delicate scent of blooming flowers, mingled with the faint aroma of freshly turned soil. Clara moved with a quiet contentment, yet beneath it stirred a small, fluttering anticipation. Today felt different. There was a sense that the garden, and perhaps her heart, were ready for something more. A familiar voice broke her reverie. "Miss Bennet?" Clara looked up to see Ethan standing at the gate, holding a small bundle of gardening gloves and tools. His smile was warm, but there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes, a quiet tension that made her heart skip. "Hello, Ethan," she replied softly. "Come in." He stepped onto the path, brushing a hand against the gate as though to steady himself. I thought maybe we could finish the pruning together today," he said, his words careful, deliberate. But as he spoke, there was something more behind them, a sincerity that went beyond mere help with the garden. Clara nodded, sensing the weight of the moment. "I'd like that," she said, her voice gentle. They worked side by side in a comfortable silence at first, each lost in the rhythm of tending to the plants. Yet Clara couldn't ignore the fluttering in her chest, the awareness that this moment was more than just gardening. Finally, Ethan paused and straightened, brushing soil from his hands. He looked at her with steady eyes. "Clara," he began, his voice calm but earnest, "I've been meaning to tell you something I probably should have said earlier." Clara felt her breath catch. There was a quiet intensity in the way he looked at her, a truth waiting to be spoken. "Yes?" she prompted softly, her heart opening in anticipation. "I admire you," he said simply, "not just for the garden or the way you care for things, but for who you are. The kindness you show, the thoughtfulness in your actions. It's rare, and I wanted you to know that." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a tender recognition of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She thought of the years filled with quiet moments, of the small joys and the echoes of the past, and realized how much she had longed for a connection that was genuine, heartfelt, and uncomplicated. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a tender recognition of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She thought of the years filled with quiet moments, of the small joys and the echoes of the past, and realized how much she had longed for a connection that was genuine, heartfelt, and uncomplicated. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice soft yet full of clarity, "that means more than you know. I feel the same way. You've brought something into my life that I didn't realize I was missing. Thank you for noticing, for caring, for being here." A quiet smile spread across his face, one that mirrored her own. There was no rush, no pressure, only the gentle understanding between two hearts that had quietly found each other. They returned to the garden work, their movements in sync, but now every glance, every shared smile carried the weight of unspoken understanding. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the roses and hydrangeas, Clara took a moment to pause and look around. The garden was alive, vibrant, and full of promise, much like the feelings stirring in her heart. She realized that the truth had set them both free, that vulnerability had created a bridge where distance and hesitation once stood. Ethan knelt beside a small patch of lavender and looked up at her. "You know," he said quietly, "gardens teach us patience. They remind us that growth takes time and that some things, if cared for, can bloom beautifully when the moment is right." Clara smiled, feeling the full meaning of his words. "And sometimes," she replied softly, "they remind us to be brave enough to let new beginnings happen." They shared a quiet laugh, the sound blending with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant hum of bees. It was a moment that needed no embellishment, just two people, fully present, fully aware of the connection that had grown between them. As they packed away the last tools and stepped back to admire their work, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. The garden was thriving, but more importantly, so was her heart. She understood now that life's quiet moments, the small gestures, the sincere words, the shared time could carry more meaning than any grand declaration ever could. Ethan smiled at her one last time before walking toward the gate, a promise in his eyes that this was only the beginning. Clara watched him go, her heart light, her spirit full, knowing that the truth had been spoken, choices had been honored, and something beautiful had begun. She leaned against the fence, inhaling the scent of roses and lavender, reflecting on the journey that had led her here. Life, she realized, was about noticing the small miracles, the fleeting connections, the gentle acts of care, the courage to speak one's heart. And in that quiet reflection, Clara felt a profound gratitude for the past, a tender joy in the present, and a hopeful anticipation for the future. The garden had grown, and so had she.